Hello, friends, and welcome to another edition of Transformational Astrology. We've got this amazing new moon eclipse coming up next week. We want to talk about that. It really triggers everything, all kinds of transformational, political, personal things that are going on. And also, we wanted to mention the YouTube channel. We'd like you to subscribe to the YouTube channel if you can get a chance to do that. And we have a surprise. We have a guest in the studio this time. So let's go to the new moon. Well, here's the chart of this very powerful solar eclipse new moon that's coming right up. And here I have with me in the studio today Leslie Benson, many of you know.
Hello.
Works with us in astrology and marketing here at Astrograph.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here today with Henry. I'm going to be asking some additional questions about this upcoming solar eclipse new moon. Should be very exciting.
We thought it was such a powerful eclipse it would take at least two of us to describe it.
That's right.
So what we have, just to look at the basics of it, it's coming up on March 8th in the evening time as far as the West Coast. It would be even later towards midnight, and then in Europe it'll be the next day, the 9th, early in the 9th. And what we have is the sun and moon very close to the south node, which is what makes it an eclipse. And they're located almost 19 degrees of Pisces. Now the reason astrologers everywhere have been very fascinated with this is because the 19 degrees of Pisces directly across from 18 degrees of Jupiter, very close to opposition Jupiter, also very close to making a semi-sextile or 30-degree aspect to Uranus here at 18 degrees of Aries. And guess what? Pluto's right there too, still the square. Make a sextile to Pluto. It's making a square to Saturn. We have a T-square between the new moon and the solar eclipse versus Jupiter, both squaring Saturn in Sagittarius, coming into 16, 17 degrees, getting close to the degree of Pluto. So that's what we wanted to bring to everyone's attention, that all of these outer planets are triggered, and the eclipse takes place in Pisces, where we have Neptune also. We have Mercury getting closer to Neptune, so you name it, it's in this eclipse. Did you want to say anything to begin with?
I am struck by all of the exact degrees that are being hit by the new moon and by Jupiter, that T-square. I'll be very interested to hear what you have to say about that one, the T-square to Saturn.
It's very dramatic. And what we have going on is we have two separate squares and the eclipse itself. So we have Pluto and we have Uranus, and they are square each other and triggered by this new moon right in between them and making aspects to each one. And then, of course, we also have the forming square between Jupiter, which is moving backwards. It's retrograde. It's moving backwards toward the 16-degree mark or the 17-degree mark. And here we have Saturn moving forward towards the 17-degree mark, the same degree as Pluto. So we have a Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn-Jupiter square, which is another very powerful thing that comes along as part of a 20-year cycle. That's the cycle of Jupiter and Saturn. And they are always political cycles. And so one thing you might say about this timing, we're living in very political times right now, and this is certainly true. I mean, in America, you would say very political times with the candidacy of Bernie Sanders, a very unique and unprecedented candidacy of grassroots, trying to bring income inequality back into line, some kind of balance. The candidacy also, of course, of perhaps our first woman president, it's looking that way, of Hillary Clinton, who is representing a liberal point of view as well. And then we have the strange candidacy, if I may, what Matt Taibbi in the Rolling Stone magazine has called the Republican clown car of candidates, but we won't go there. But anyway, so it is political times here in this country. It's political times in Europe too, with the refugee crisis, Syrian refugee crisis. We have the United States and Russia cooperating in some ways against ISIS, on maybe different points of view about Syria. It's very, very, very volatile times, I feel it is. So that's one thing that we have going on. And yes?
Can you also talk a little bit about how that might affect each of us personally? I hear
Definitely.
that it's a big collective thing, but I'm also curious how it might be showing up on an individual level.
Good point. Yeah, I was just about to say that, of course, the thing that really affects each one of us, isn't it, is what's happening in our own personal lives, how that might connect with the collective in certain ways. And one thing that I have done in my life with the study of astrology is I have tried to understand what really makes humans tick and how we could understand more about ourselves if we study the stars. And that's been a big focus for many years, starting with a Jungian perspective that there is depth to the human experience that we all have. And what do these outer planets do? But they bring out the depth, do they not? When we look at Pluto, for example, which is very prominent in this configuration, we've got a lot of Pluto going on this whole year. So Pluto is all about not only transformation and change, which we always say Pluto equals transformation, but we also must recognize Pluto comes from a very deep layer of the human condition, I believe. And I know you work in the same way, don't you?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Did you want to say something about that, or did you have another comment about these configurations? We look at configurations all the time, Leslie and I both, and we know that this is a very powerful one. It's unusually strong, the connections.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious about the polarity that's happening on the Pisces and Virgo axis. There's so much happening in Pisces over there with the new moon, and then opposite Jupiter. And I feel like the Pisces Virgo axis is a lot about healing and a lot about purifying and coming into greater alignment with our visions. And to have Saturn square both of those feels like the rubber's hitting the road. It's like where do we bring that? Where do we bring our highest ideals into as many moments as we can into our daily lives? It
Absolutely.
feels potent.
Absolutely. And certainly there is a huge Pisces stellium. We have Mercury, we have Neptune, we have the Sun and Moon, we have Chiron, very close to the eclipse degree, which I didn't mention earlier when we were talking about all these other outer planets. There, everything's triggered in this new moon, including the south node of the moon. And then what's remarkable about the opposite sign of Pisces, namely Virgo, is that only one planet stands apart from all those. So we do have a very strong emphasis on Jupiter right now. So there's a way you could say that this is a really powerful time for individuals to seize upon their possibilities. We have a very strong presence in this chart of both Jupiter and Uranus. Jupiter and Uranus in combination have a lot to do with inventiveness, creativeness, finding the unique solution that really works for you personally. Your ideas that are forming now are going to be ideas that will last for a long time in your life. So it's a really good time to pay attention to what's coming up for you, to look into deep intuition. Remember that Uranus represents intuition. And it's a positive time. It's a very optimistic time. Now, I can say that it's a very optimistic time, and yet I can also say, oh my gosh, it's a very scary, dark time, because look, we also have, besides this close forming semi-sextile here between Saturn and Pluto, we have, look, the parallels are still very active. We have 21 degrees exactly where Saturn is located in terms of declination, and we have 20.9, just a tenth of a degree different, where Pluto is. So Saturn and Pluto are quite involved here, and that is a dark side, isn't it? That is coming to an understanding that the structures of our lives in some ways aren't working. We could say that about the social matrix that surround us. The structures are not working. And in our own individual lives as well, there's ways that we must make adjustments. And I think that's what this is about.
I agree. Yeah, the structures upon which our society is built and upon which we operate in our lives seem to be crumbling away, and we're building something totally new, which is definitely scary, but there's so much possibility and choice involved. And I'm curious, Henry, also if you wanted to speak to this a little bit. It came into my mind when you were saying what you just did, especially around Uranus and Jupiter, that there's so much possibility and so much innovation available to us right now. Do you think that there's also almost a possibility for confusion in that, where if there's almost too much choice and we really have to use our discernment and narrow things down, because there's so many directions in which we could go, and so it's about really getting in alignment with what feels the truest and feels the best to move forward with.
Well, I think that's an excellent point, that there is so much choice, there is so much possibility, and we have all kinds of temptations. I mean, we could go at escapism, we could go.
And that's a lot of Neptune, right? Neptune can be very much wanting to escape. Is that?
Well, I was thinking
Sure.
of that, yes, and I was thinking also of even the Iranian theme because uh, you just have inspiration and wild hairs and could be impulse to do anything. And
And it might take you in a strange direction.
strange directions, it might be just the direction you need to go. It's a good time to jump the tracks. If jumping the tracks is what's coming up, it's a good time to stay steady if staying steady is what's required. It really is a very careful, and we have plenty of Saturn to help us ground,
Yeah.
a very careful time as well as a very exciting time.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like there's a lot of deep listening required right now for each of us to be on a path that's in service to the highest good. And that seems to me like it would tie into the themes of Eris, which of course you are an expert on. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit how Eris, the Eris archetype ties in to this new moon.
Well, thanks for bringing that forward. Yeah, there's so much else going on in this configuration. I wasn't mentioning Eris, but of course it is fascinating how close Eris is to Uranus, which does get even closer as we get into the summer.
Right.
By June 29th, they're going to be conjunct exactly.
Oh, wow.
And then that is going to be less than a degree apart, leading all the way to the end of the year. So this is a big time for both Uranus and Eris. In my research, I found that Eris inevitably brings forward the planet that it conjuncts in the natal chart or makes a close aspect to in the natal chart. The same thing would be true in a world transit such as the Uranus and the Pluto. So we're going to see a lot of innovation, a lot of change, a lot of impulse for change. We're already seeing it, aren't we? We're seeing this revolutionary impulse arising in the collective, and I believe in our individual lives as well. We're seeing how the possibilities are there, and we have, of course, some fear, don't we, about whether we can act on that. What concretely can we do? Does it make sense to go forward with things that we are planning and thinking about, or do we have to hold back? And that's where the Eris really comes in too, because Eris is about your soul purpose. It's about getting in touch with what it is that you cannot not do, that you have to, this is what you have to bring forward. And you can resist it, just like with Pluto, with the changes of Pluto, but there's times when you recognize this is what I have to do, as Bernie Sanders recognized when he began his campaign, I'm pretty sure. This is what I have to do. I can't leave this alone. I have to go forward with it.
Yeah. Awesome. Do you want to talk a little bit how that ties into all that's going on in the 12th house too?
Well, yeah, I think the 12th house is so important right now. I mean, it's the 12th house of the natural chart. It's the Pisces sign. We're talking about Pisces really. And that is a representation of unconscious process. And that was what Jung talked about, that in the Jungian psychology, you have to tune in to what is below the surface at the unconscious layers if you really want to understand yourself through and through. It's just like when the Titanic hit the iceberg. There is so much below the surface that we are not really aware of until something hits us. And we do have to become more aware of that if we are to become more whole. And I think that is also part of the message of these times. I agree. That's a very important point about so much Pisces.
Yeah.
Did you want to say anything else as we conclude here?
No, I feel excited to see what's to come.
It's very exciting. We've got a lot of things going on. There's an optimistic side to this times as well as a dire and a necessity times. And what we can recognize with astrology is that there are spiritual forces that are coming to our aid, really, that we can tune into. There's places that we can recognize below the surface layers of our consciousness and our deep unconscious that are represented by these outer planet energies, and you could think of them as, ambassadors of the galaxy is what Dane Rudyard called them. And,
celestial allies.
And celestial allies, very good. That's exactly right. You could think of them as angel guides is another way to talk about it. I love what astrologer Carolyn Casey says about these outer planet influences. She says, spiritual forces are ready, willing, and able to come to your aid. They are there for you, but spiritual etiquette requires that you ask. You have to be open. You have to be ready.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have for you today. I always like to talk about resources when we wind up here, and there's a terrific book called The Gods of Change that really encapsulates some of the message we were getting at with these outer planets that are coming in so powerfully with this eclipse, by Howard Susportis, who worked with Liz Green. The two of them are both Jungians who worked in astrology. And of course, Liz's book, many of her books, including the one on Saturn, including the book of Neptune that she wrote, very good books. And I always like to mention, which I haven't so far, The Astrology of Personality by Jane Rujar is another terrific foundational book in all this. And Mark Edmund Jones is another one of those really early pioneers in humanistic astrology. He wrote most famously The Sabian Symbols in Astrology is his major book now that's relevant now. And Astrology, Karma, and Transformation by Stephen Arroyo, another terrific book. So I'm giving you my creme de la creme of the books that we have available. And the Time Passages software is also something that we like to recommend. And you want to say something about that or about anything?
I do. We have an exciting announcement about the Time Passages software. Now that we've released 6.0, it includes interpretations for Eris. This
True.
is new. It's one of the only software that provides interpretations for Eris. And I also want to recommend and encourage you all to check out Henry's book, The 10th Planet, Astrological Revelations of Eris. It's amazing. It has many, many hours of research poured into the book, and it's just amazing information about the archetype. If you resonate with it and want to tap more deeply into your soul purpose and what that's all about, I highly recommend you check it out.
Oh, thanks for saying.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, so see you next time.
Happy New Moon Eclipse!